This Silvertone 8005 is haunted. Yes, it is. Everything I touch, or anytime I come near it, something breaks. Well, what am I talking about? About 3 or 4 days ago, I came home from work and walked the dog. Came back in and I took the flashlight, which is the one I usually, go outside with at night. And I set it up here real quick like, and I must have not set it back far enough because it fell. And when it fell, it just went down on the desk. And I looked around, no big deal. I just went ahead and picked it up and stuck it back up there where it belongs. Well, guess what happened when it fell? Wifey decided to sweep underneath and around my workbench yesterday, and in the process of doing so, she swept this up. Well, she's very alert to every little screw and nut and washer and little piece of wire or anything that might be on the floor. She always asks me. She's learned over the years, is this needed now before I throw it away? Well, she came up with this thing here this time. And I said, well, what the heck is that? She said, I don't know. It's just right there below your bench. I said, well, I don't know. I took it from her and I turned it around. And I said, well, now that looks familiar. Unbelievable. I couldn't believe it. So I went and got the cabinet for this radio. And I began to look around. Sure enough, look there. When that flashlight fell, it hit right there. There's no doubt in my mind now. And I hadn't even noticed it until she swept up this little gizmo. So guess what? We have another repair action ahead of us. Will I ever get done with this radio? I can't remember the last time I saw this kind of weather situation in Conway. Look at that band of rain. Starts down here. Let me see if I can make it a little bit smaller. It's just constantly coming up here out of Texas. And it's going right through the town of Conway the entire way. It's been raining here now all day. It's supposed to continue raining over the next few days, but it goes, nobody over here has any rain, nobody over here, just us, right up through that town. That's amazing. Well, there we go, WSM 650 AM Nashville on the old Silvertone 8005. Boy, I'll tell you what, this baby's playing real good. I've got it hooked to the external antenna right now, out in the tree. Good stuff there. Let's turn on the light here. Looking real good, huh? Got the needle in, everything's working perfectly. It's right on for 650. Look at there. Speaker rattle's all gone. I love that magic fix stuff. Can't beat it. To do the old body work on this cabinet, the one piece has been glued in that I had. This piece here was totally missing. I couldn't find it anywhere. So I filled it all in with JB Quick. And I have a piece of blue plastic on the rear to support it. After it's dried all night, tomorrow I'll go ahead and take my moto tool and grind away enough to get the tape off. And then I'll just have to start shaping and sanding, just like, just regular old body work on a car. We'll see how that works. How about a little Foggy Mountain Boys here? There's still some good AM stations out there. You just got to search for them. Get an antenna up where you can pick them up. This is great stuff. I just love WSM out of Nashville. It is time to get with the program on this thing. The JB Quick is hardened up real good. I let it harden overnight. What I'm going to do is start out by just trimming it down with our little Black & Decker rotary tool, just kind of trim it down a little bit, not much. I don't want to go down to the plastic, just sort of knock the bumps off, Then I'll go ahead and try sanding it with a little bit of 800 grit paper, and then finishing it off if need be with some 1000 grit. It's not going to be easy. It's going to be a little bit of a job, but I just can't leave it busted like that. Then we're going to, if everything turns out halfway decent, which it probably won't. I'm not a body man, but we'll go ahead and put some paint on it, and maybe it'll cover most of the boo-boos up. Let's get started. Well, that's it, my friends. That's the best I can do on that. I'll go home and slap some primer on it. We'll tape it off, put some primer on it. Let it dry and give it a light sanding. And if need be, we'll put a couple of coats of primer. Then we'll shoot it with the top coat, kind of greenish there and greenish colored. We'll call this one over. If I do much more on it, I'm going to overwork it and screw it up big time. Well, it looks like the last thing we're going to have to do to this radio before we put it back in the plastic cabinet is we got to cut this shaft down. I replaced this volume and on-off switch with a brand new one, and the shaft, of course, is way too long. This is the length we need right here. It's only 3/8 of an inch. About 3/8 of an inch is what it's going to be. So we need to cut it down from about right here where the threads start. We'll cut that about 3/8. I'm going to mark it with this pen. Then I'm going to take this old moto tool. First I'm going to put some tape around there, some paper around there. Make sure nothing gets through this hole. I don't want any metal getting up in there or whatever. I don't know. I want to protect it from any kind of metal filings. Then we're just going to take this cutting wheel and my little old Black & Decker rotary tool. I'm just going to cut right down through it. Now once we get done, we'll of course have to make a part of it flat. Now this is where most people have their biggest problems, and I have had that in the past, trust me. This thing needs to be flattened, but boy, I'll tell you what, it just barely has to be flattened. I always seem to flatten it too much, and when I put the knob on, it just flopped around on there. You want it to be snug. As you can see, it just barely, maybe I don't know, maybe a 1/16 of an inch, maybe a little less, that you go down into the shaft. Not very much, okay? I'll tell you what, let's go ahead and get this thing marked and cut. There she is marked. I'm going to double and triple measure that before I cut it. By the way, the best way that I've found, the best and quickest way that I've found to cover up the back part of the shaft that you're cutting is just take a piece of regular old newspaper, punch a hole in it with a pencil, and then just slide it over the shaft back as far as she'll go. And that should seal it, keep any filings from getting down in there. Some of these end of the shaft areas here are kind of open, and you don't want those filings to get there, so this will help a lot. Alright, once she's cut, you're going to have to cut, bevel off the real sharp edges around the outside edge. You'll see how sharp this one is. This is really sharp. You don't want that. You got to get rid of that. So the best way I've found, this is an aluminum shaft, by the way. Best way I found is just take some old wet dry sandpaper and just keep working at it all the way around until you get it nice and smooth where there's nothing sharp. That feels real good. Now to put the flat spot in. Now I want you all to pay attention to this. I wish I'd had somebody kind of counsel me a little bit on the first time I did it. The first time I took it way down. It was really dumb, I just looked at it at first when I did a first glance. We're going to take this down just a tad at a time, and we're going to keep testing it with this knob. Let me show you how that's done. Now if you have a moto tool, some people like to do it with a hand file, just a flat regular hand file. I don't particularly like that idea. I definitely would make a mistake with a hand file. So I use the old rotary tool, and I can use either this bit for it, which is just a grinding stone, or I can use the one with the sandpaper wheel around it, okay? And what we're going to do is just going to gently. Now, this knob has nothing on there, no arrows or anything like that, so I don't have to worry about how it goes on because it has no markings. But some of these knobs have markings, so you have to make sure your knob is off, and then make sure you're, find out where the flat spot's supposed to be, so when you put your knob on, the arrow on the knob lines up with the on-off, or whatever it happens to be, tone button back and forth, you know, high and low tone, treble, that sort of thing. So you have to make sure you know where you're going to put that flat spot, so the knob, when you're done, is pointing in the right spot when you slide it on the shaft. This one I don't have to worry about though. So let me get one of the, I haven't decided which one of these I'm going to use yet. Probably going to be the sandpaper, because aluminum will really gum up the works on these here, but I use it for touch-up a lot. But you don't want to be doing any heavy grinding on aluminum with something like this. Actually, believe it or not, it can get hot enough to shatter while you're using it. If you get too much of an aluminum buildup on a grinding stone, actually they would explode, just blow away. Let's say that after you grind the flat spot down on the shaft you're working on, you discover when it's done you went too far. Oh man, I ground it too far. I shouldn't have gone that far. Now the knob, it just slips on and off. It's about to fall off on its own practically. What now? Well, the first thing you do is you just sort of go get a cup of coffee or a Coke, and then you kind of sit back and see the humor in the whole thing. Lesson learned, you know. Next time, don't take so much off. Hey, been there, done that, okay? What do you don't sit around and pull your hair out over it? No, you don't worry about it. So what do I do? I don't want to buy another pot. Well, you take a little sandpaper and you sand it down a little bit rough. And then you build it up with a little bit of JB Weld. Not the JB Quick. Use the JB Weld, okay? Kind of build it up a little bit, let it dry overnight, and then go back and regrind with your moto tool or your hand file or whatever it is you want to use to file it with, okay? We don't worry about these sort of things. We just fix them. Well, I've just done the first pass. I went, up and down a few times with my grinder, and as you can see, I probably put a little bit too much pressure in the rear and not enough pressure in the front. But I'd rather put too little than too much. And I just tried the knob on it. The knob will not go on yet. Not quite. We're going to have to take off just a little bit more. Now I'm keeping this knob in the off position to hold it in place while I do the grinding. The trick is to keep the thing level as you can when you do it, okay? Let's do grind number 2. She is starting. I just barely took off a couple of licks. It's just one of those barely take it off, and then test it. And as you can see, it's starting to want to go on, but it just won't slide all the way back. Once we get it down to just about the right size, we'll finish the rest up probably by hand with some of that sandpaper. I just don't want to overdo it. This can be a real touchy situation. If you ever do it, you'll find out what I'm talking about. Alright, we've just about got it. The front is good. All I have to do is take a little bit more off the rear. And that knob will go all the way on. Right now it's holding real good. I like that. Okay. Alright, she's down there all the way. And she's nice and snug. She's not going to go anywhere. Works good. Now I'm going to go ahead and just kind of dress it up a little bit. Not much, with the old black sandpaper. And then put a little grease on it. And I think our knob will be done. Alright, just a little recap here. Now that thing is very good. It's on there nice and snug. Not too tight. Not too tight. Works perfectly. I got lucky this time. I remember the first time I did that. Oh my God. I had to wind up buying a brand new one. I think even at that time I didn't have enough sense to put JB Weld on it. Well, starting out in the beginning, we all make our boo-boos, people. Remember, measure your shaft, compare it to the other lengths of the other shafts. Make sure it is the right length, and then go ahead and do your cutting with your cutting wheel. Mark it with your pen, okay? Mark it carefully. I recommend you measure 3 or 4 times before you mark it, okay? And then finally when you mark it, know in your mind that you did it. Okay, it's done, it's right. Then just go ahead and take your cutting wheel, cut it off very slowly, down through. Slowly, 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 all the way down. There's no rush, no rush. Take the cutting wheel out once in a while, drop it back down in, take it out until you finally get all the way through. Then take your sandpaper and kind of smooth up the corners on it to get the sharp edges. away, and then I decided to use this time. I just kind of went down bit by bit, slowly, but just a little lick at a time, little lick at a time. But there was no rush to any of this until finally the knob fit the way it's supposed to fit. One last item: save your cutoff shaft. Okay. Now the chances are, when you cut this shaft the first time, if you've never done it, it's going to be cut at an angle. It's not going to be cut nice and flat. It's going to be like, look at that stupid cut. It's cut at an angle, Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. Just take your moto tool or something like this, and kind of, straighten it up on the end. A couple of licks until it's, mostly square, mostly straight up and down. Look, don't have a heart attack over this stuff, okay? It's just a shaft is all it is. It needs to be cut off. It needs to be have a flat spot put on. Maybe you'll get lucky and it doesn't need a flat spot. Maybe it's just you got a round knob, you just slip right on it. Keep your shaft. You never know when you're going to need to splice one on to one maybe that's too short, okay? Which I thought I was going to have to do this time. It turned out I did not. Well, that's it, guys. That's about the best I can fix the side that was broken out. It looks pretty good, It's not exactly perfect. Like I said, I'm not a body man, but you can't hardly see where it was broken. And I have that big piece in the back here, right there, that's kind of holding it in. It's kind of a lip, and it helps out a lot, that JB Quick right there. Anyway, that's it. I think what I'm going to do now is go ahead and get the radio back in the cabinet. Well, I think we can go ahead and call this one fixed. If the speaker rattle returns at a later date, which I anticipate that it will, what we will do is start a new series on this radio, and we will troubleshoot this thing until we figure out exactly what would be causing it. Okay, and I don't care if it takes 3,000 videos. Right now it sounds pretty good.
In the future, remember to hold on to your rock.
And we still have some rainy storms in the area, so you're going to hear a little static in the background.
General Division are open 7 days a week, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. The Country Music Hall of Fame and music. Well, the Wilson County Fair got underway earlier today, and as part of that, with in-depth coverage you can't get anywhere else. Every time, watch Fox 23 News.
Pretty good sound, huh?
From the Ferguson Buick GMC studio.
Well, that's it. Until next time, this is John.
Transmitted Zika cases on Miami. Neither case is connected.
Oops, as usual, I don't know how I do this every time. I got a question about the filament or the heater in the rectifier tube on this radio. So we've got to answer that question before I can call it quits for the day. Let's set things up here. One of our good subscribers wanted to know what this HT pin was on the 35Z5 rectifier for this radio. Well, HT stands for heater tap, and if you'll follow the line down, you'll see that it's actually tapped off the heater. Right here, it shows it as being in the middle. But after, speaking with Brendan about all this, and he's sort of the expert on this sort of thing, and I'm not into the AA5 radios that much. I don't think I've only repaired about 2, and I didn't have to do a whole lot. He said that this may show up as being right in the middle of that heater, but in fact it's over to the left a little bit. This part of the heater on the right lights up the tube and makes the tube operate. This side of the heater, where the tap is, they needed voltage to operate the bulb, the light bulb, the pilot bulb, the lamp. So what they did was they came around and they just tapped right off that heater. I'm not so sure that was such a hot idea. What happened was and it kind of took the load off the heater. You got all this voltage coming in from the plug here, and it's going right through that heater, and then it's coming up, going through the rest of the heaters, and then to the other side of the line being returned to the plug, okay? And if this bulb blows out, the load is decreased and more voltage goes through more voltage and current goes through the heater because it's no longer being siphoned off by the bulb. And R4 also siphons it off because R4 is the plate resistor for the plate. So when the bulb blows, there's still voltage coming down here, and it's going through this resistor is trying to pick up the load that the bulb had, and it still supply voltage to the plate. And what happens is the resistor will eventually burn out also. People in the old days, the bulb would blow out and the radio was still playing. They say, "Oh, the heck with it, it's still playing. Just let her rip. Let's just keep her going. There's no biggie to us." But what they didn't realize was eventually this resistor would also burn out. Of course, if they had taken out and if this had a higher wattage resistor, it probably would have had no problem at all. But these were half watts, I guess. And then eventually, with all this gone, that high voltage would come in, go straight through here, and just wipe out that filament or that heater. I hope that makes sense to everybody.